I'm going to show you how to make traditional lasagna. Yes, this one has meat. I know I'm a vegetarian, but I'm making it for neighbors. And I'll show you how to do it right now. Since lasagna noodles boil in a lot of water, I'm starting my soup pot full of water first and put that heat on high. So you can see the high heat here. And I put about a half a teaspoon of salt in there, and when it boils, we'll look at that. Let's get on to the meat. To cook the meat, I'm going to set the heat on kind of a medium to medium low. And I'm using ground beef. Now, some of you might like a combination of ground beef and something like sausage. It's up to you. And it's a pound. And what I'm going to do is cook this first and then skim off as much of the fat as possible. And then I'll cook the onion and the garlic in with it. And I'm not going to make you watch me cook this whole thing. But you just want, if you're new to cooking, you want to make sure that the beef doesn't get overheated or sit too long without you stirring it, because then it'll just look like a piece of hamburger in here that you just have to break up. And if you put the heat too high, it'll burn. So just keep an eye on it, and you can chop the onion while the meat is cooking. After you touch raw meat, make sure that you wash your hands before you start handling other vegetables and things. So I have an onion here, but I'm only going to want a half a cup of chop. So I'm going to pull off some of this papery stuff. And everybody has their favorite way of doing that. And some of this isn't so lovely. Okay, so I guess it might be about this much, and I still don't like how some of this looks. Get rid of that. And again, some of you will have your favorite, I didn't mean to cut that all the way through, but I did. So we're looking for small pieces of onion here. And a half cup measuring cup. A little bit more, that's fine. In fact, I'm close, but I want this entire piece that I cut off in here. So I'm just going to make it fit. Okay. And I'll just put this in a bowl. I'm also going to do a couple cloves of garlic, and you can either put them through a mincer or you can chop them really small. It depends on whether you have a mincer. But let's check the ground beef before we move on. All right, this is coming along. It's browning, which is what we want. We want to get all of the pink part browned. And that's looking good. It's coming along. So I have my garlic mincer here. Put the piece in and put it through. I'm going to use not the sharp side of the knife, but the other side to slice it off. And I have a second one, and I've already removed the papery part of the garlic clove. And then, oops, let's check the meat, see how that's doing. It's looking good still. It's about 2/3 of the way done being cooked. And then we'll be able to see if there's some extra fat we can get off of it before we cook the onion and the garlic. You're going to bake this in a 9x13 baking dish, but I'm actually making this for neighbors who did me a favor. So I bought one of these foil pans, and I actually bought the one that says giant lasagna pan, but it's only because it's deep. It's deeper than a regular 9x13 cake pan. So if you buy one of these, make sure that you clean it out first with soap and water. It will also have, like here, it has some glue. So just give it a scrub with some hot soapy water and a good rinse. It'll be ready to go. The meat is completely cooked now, so there's quite a bit of grease in here. So some people just like to skim some off with a little cup or a spoon like this, but I'd rather just dump it into a big strainer with a bowl underneath to catch it, and then put the meat back. Alright, so now I'm going to put it back on the stove, and we're going to cook the onion and garlic with this. I have the meat back on the stove now. And, I turn the heat back on to about, I think it's about medium, yeah, medium low. And I'm going to put all the onions in. And I'm going to put the garlic in, but I'm just going to let the garlic touch the pan for a little bit, because minced garlic gets cooked very, very fast. So I'm going to keep watch on the garlic here, and then I'll incorporate it right into the meat. But I want all of these onions to get very cooked. Now that the garlic is starting to cook, I'm going to just pull it up and incorporate it into the meat so that the garlic doesn't get scorched on the bottom of the pan. I'm still cooking the onions though. I still want them to cook touching the pan until they're more wilted, and then I'll stir them into the ground beef. While the beef and onions and garlic are cooking, I have a 28-ounce can of whole tomatoes that I'm going to pour into this big bowl. And then you can either use a knife and fork to cut them, or with clean hands and clean kitchen shears, you can cut the tomatoes. So you just want to cut them into pieces. They don't need to be tiny. Just kind of medium, haphazard pieces. And just kind of figure it out as you go. And do all of them. You can stick your fingers in them, or even pull them apart. However you like to break up whole tomatoes. And we're going to be using the tomatoes and the juice that they came in the can. Okay. And don't cut your fingers with the scissors. Oh, really. This is a great dish to make if you need to make a meal for a family and they're not vegetarians. Yes, I'm a vegetarian and I'm making meat lasagna, but like I said, it's for somebody else. Alright, so you can kind of guess if you've gotten everything cut in small enough pieces. And we're good for the next step. Now that the onions are pretty far along being cooked, I'm going to stir in the tomatoes that I just chopped up. And hang on a second. And then I'm also going to put in 8 ounces, excuse me, that's not 8 ounces. This is a 15-ounce can of tomato sauce. And a 6-ounce can of tomato paste. Sticky. And then I have a few other things to put in here before I bring it to cook. And I have, in here I have 2 teaspoons of dried basil, 1 teaspoon of salt, and a half a teaspoon of ground black pepper. And I'll give that a stir, and what I want to do is bring it to a simmer, and once it does, I'm going to reduce the heat to low so it keeps simmering. I'll put a cover on it, and then I just want to cook this for a while. Anywhere from 15 minutes to 45 minutes. And the water for the noodles has not boiled yet. To figure out how many lasagna noodles you're going to need before I cook them, typically you're going to do 2 layers of lasagna noodles. So if you can see this, I'm probably going to need 4 across, but then I've got this gap down here, so once they're cooked I'll do a 5th one. So I'm going to cook 10 lasagna noodles, and my box of lasagna noodles is a pound, but there are about 20 or 21 noodles in the box, but I'm going to cook 10, and I'm going to cook 5 at a time. So the water is finally boiling, and I'm going to put in 5 lasagna noodles at a time, and then once it returns to a boil, I'm going to set the timer for 10 minutes. While I'm waiting for the noodles to finish cooking, I've taken the lid off of the meat and tomato sauce because I want it to thicken. I want to give it a little better chance. So it's still on simmer, so just adjust your heat so that it's just doing this little bit of bubbling. Maybe that's a little too much. And once in a while give it a stir. Don't put the heat too high. But if you want, you can cook this sauce, start it even earlier and cook it for a good hour or so just to get it thicker. Because the longer you cook it, it'll just keep getting a little bit thicker and a little bit thicker. Or if you don't like it this thin, use half as much tomato sauce. Instead of the full can, use a half a can of the sauce. Okay, this first batch of noodles are done, and I'm going to carefully pull them out. And what I'm going to do is put them into this dish over here. It should be interesting to try to show this. And maybe I'll use this mitt. I have a silicone pot holder that can get wet. Oh! Alright, so I already slipped one back in. So, silicone pot holder. That's the ticket over here. So I have one long plastic fork. I don't know how people did this without really good tools. Because the thing is, if you dump it into a colander in the sink, these noodles might break. So I have another idea. One of these, hang on. Let me not make you watch. Okay, I'm trying one of these. I still have the silicone pot holder though. Alright, that might have worked. Still, I don't know, I might try one at a time. I still have the water boiling because I have more noodles to go. Let me see if there's one still in here. There is. All right, that was interesting. And I've heard of no boil lasagna noodles, but I really don't want to try that. Okay, so my water is still boiling, and I'm going to put in the last 5 noodles. And once the water boils, I'll set the timer for 10 minutes. I have one last thing to mix together here, and we're starting with 2 eggs, and just mix them up with a fork, like you would for scrambled eggs. Then the next thing I'm going to mix in here is ricotta cheese. Some people use cottage cheese. Kind of depends on what kind of lasagna you grew up with, like ricotta. And you want between 2.5 to 3 cups. And I've measured some out here. This is not a great way to measure cheese, but I wanted to do it quickly. And I bought more than I needed. From the packaging, I didn't know how much 2.5 to 3 cups would be, but the container itself is 15. Okay, now I haven't seen it. Oh, it's 32 ounces. Great. No wonder. Okay, so 32 ounces was too much. 16 ounces probably would have been good. All right. Then the other thing I'm going to put in here, I've got a combination of things in here. I've got 2 tablespoons of parsley flakes, dried, 1 teaspoon of salt, and 1/2 teaspoon of pepper, just like I put in the last thing. All right, we're going to mix this up, and this is going to be one of the layers in the lasagna. All right, so just give it a good stir till it's all mixed up. And you can mix this up right before you're ready to assemble the lasagna. All right. There we go. Wait a minute. I forgot one more ingredient for this mixture, and that's 1/2 cup of either Parmesan or Romano cheese. Now, I found one that's a combination of Parmesan and Romano together. So we're doing 1/2 cup. We'll mix it in. And later, we're also going to need another 1/4 cup of this same Parmesan or Romano or combination cheese. All right. And I bought that already grated. Okay. On to the next step. Before I assemble the layers, I'm a little concerned that the noodles might stick to this type of pan at the bottom. If I were using glass or ceramic, I wouldn't do this, but I'm putting in a little olive oil and taking a paper towel that I folded up and just putting it along the edges. If you have oil spray, you could use that. Okay, so now we're ready for the first layer, which is the noodles. And I'm going to do 5, and you can overlap them. Oh, and they might actually meet. I didn't expect them to grow. Okay, interesting. So they grow when you boil them. That was interesting. So I really didn't need 5. I could do 4. Interesting. All right, I might do that anyway. And I cleaned off my scissors. And I'm going to do a couple over here just because I can. This one's broken. Okay. Then our next layer is the ricotta. So you have to kind of eyeball it that you're going to put in half of the ricotta that you have in the bowl. Okay. And then spread it. Maybe this is where cottage cheese is easier. I don't know. And it doesn't need to be a thick layer. Oops. All right. And the next layer is the mozzarella cheese, and you're going to do half. So this recipe calls for 1 pound of mozzarella cheese sliced. And I bought it already sliced in a package that says I can tear it, but I don't think I can. So I'll get some different scissors. And my packages come 8 ounces each, so that's a half a pound. Alright. And they're on little Ziploc-y things, but I'm not going to do so. So mine comes like this. And sometimes they're cut kind of thin, sometimes they're cut kind of thick. So you can play it by ear. How you want to put these in here. If you want them overlapping or not. It depends on how thick or thin the slices are. I like them to be at least thick enough that I can pull them apart here. So I did have enough to overlap a little better, but I didn't know that going in. Let's put a couple more over here. All right, and now we're ready for half of the meat sauce. I'm just going to use a ladle, and remember you're only doing half to start here. And then you'll do the other half for the second layer. So if that's hard to figure out how much is half, then go ahead and measure it so that you know exactly how much half is. Now if you're going to bake this right away, you should have already preheated your oven. Now the recipe I'm using calls for an oven at 375 degrees Fahrenheit, but some recipes call for lasagna to bake at 350. So preheat it in the middle with the rack in the middle. Alright, so now we're ready for our second layer. So next are the noodles. We're back with our noodles that got long in the water. I'll just overlap them a little bit more. I'll just overlap them. Okay, ricotta cheese. All right. And mozzarella cheese. I know it gets long after a while. Some of you are fast forwarding, that's okay. Mozzarella cheese, and I'm going to do a better job of overlapping this time. Maybe not down the middle. Okay, and then the meat sauce will be last. You can get out a large spoon. The ladle is, it's hard to get out what's at the bottom of the pan with a ladle. So I'm going to scoop out the rest. Oh, sorry. Didn't mean to do that. My foot hit the tripod. All right. Okay, get out every last bit. And then after I spread this, I have some of that Parmesan Romano mixture of cheese. Make sure all the noodles are covered, all the cheese is covered, the noodles in particular. Okay, I have a 1/4 cup of the Romano Parmesan. But if you like more, then go ahead and sprinkle on more. So, like I said, if you're baking this right now, then you should be preheating your oven to 375 or 350. I think the people I'm bringing this to want more cheese. But I'm going to be refrigerating this for a while. So in order to refrigerate it, I'm going to cover it first with plastic wrap, and then with foil, and then put it in the refrigerator. And when they bake this, they're going to preheat their oven to 375, and they're going to bake it a little longer. So if you're putting this straight into the oven right now, you're not going to refrigerate it, then bake it for between 30 and 35 minutes. But if you're refrigerating it first, and pulling it out of the oven and putting it straight into the oven out of the refrigerator, then bake it for 45. And after you take it out of the oven, let it sit on the counter for 10 minutes before you slice it. All right, here it is done, and I'm so happy that when it's cut, it stayed together. So I'm going to cut a piece and show you a little bit here. But if we do this and use a spatula, it's going to stay together pretty well. So that's traditional meat-based lasagna.